You have way too many suppliers. I didn't curse, I said bleeping. Hello, sorcerers. It's been a while. I haven't done a video in like a month, and I wanted to talk to you about tail spend. This kind of connects to my last video about matrix partners and all of the people that are involved in the contracting process. But what is the outcome of the contracting process? It is being able to consume from a specific supplier. And this happens hundreds, if not thousands of times throughout the course of a year. I'm about to hit you with an honest to goodness, useful metric that you can use, especially if you work at a large corporation. You should have no more than 1,500 suppliers per $1 billion of spend. Or, you could say for every $1 million of spend, only 15 suppliers? Did I do that math right? I think I did. Anything more than that is egregious. 1,500 per billion is borderline egregious. You should do less. Why is that the case? It's because no company is going to have enough procurement staff to properly oversee and manage thousands upon thousands of suppliers. So what happens? All of the attention ends up going to the ones that you spend the most money with. 80% of all of your spend will go to 20% of your suppliers. I'm going to say that again. 80% of your spend goes to 20% of your suppliers. So that means that 80% of your transactions go to the bottom 20% of your spend, which means there's all of this stuff within your company that is not being managed properly. And I'm going to make the connection to my last video on matrix partners. It takes so much time to properly vet and onboard a company to do business with a major corporation. You have to negotiate the contract. And I said before, contract negotiations for new master services agreements can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months. You have to get legal involved. You have to get privacy involved. You have to get information protection involved. You have to get corporate risk involved. You may have IT departments that set up different SLAs. You have to have all of these things in place. They have to vet, review the contracts, change the language. It takes months. And then once you come to agreement, you have to work with your accounts payable department to get the supplier paid. You have to work with treasury sometimes. Depending on the type of spend, you may go through a third party because the supplier is small. You have to set up POs. You have to set up term sheets. You have to upload the contracts in different places. Not to mention the fact that if you are using some kind of fancy procurement software, you probably have to get the supplier to register with said procurement software, which they may not want to do, which is a whole other fight. I really want you to think about all of the departments involved in getting your supplier turned on and ready to transact, ready to pay, and ready to consume from. It takes months. And sometimes these products, sometimes these services, they're the only game in town. They are truly disruptors. They are truly innovators. They are dramatically going to change the way your company can conduct business. It happens, and in those situations, it is totally appropriate to onboard those suppliers, those transformational suppliers. It's absolutely important to do that, and you should do that as a company. But then there are situations where you are buying literally 8 different project management software platforms or 8 different instant messaging tools. And in those situations, not only are you spending more time to get those suppliers onboarded, you're actually creating what I like to call a Tower of Babel situation. You have all of these tribes that don't and can't speak to each other because they're not on the same technological platform. You're actually wasting corporate strategy, innovation, and money because all of this documentation could be holistically stitched together if they're on the same platform, but they're not. You have all of these people that you have to train on these different platforms and these different software tools that you don't have to, and people could all be talking the same language. So how do you manage tail spend? What's the strategy? The most important thing is buy off from your customers. Your customers have to understand why this is a problem, and collectively, as a community, procurement, IT, legal, the customers have to group together and say, no more. We're going to consolidate our platforms. We're going to make Those 8 suppliers, maybe we'll cut it down to 2, and we're going to make them more strategic. We're going to have better relationships with them, and you may be able to get better pricing because you're giving them more volume. And here's a crazy thought coming from a procurement guy. Even if you aren't saving money with the negotiation, you're saving money from operational costs, having less software, services, platforms. It's going to make it cheaper to run your business. I'm leaning heavily on software as the primary example for this conversation because I think it drives the point home the most. In some cases, in some procurement examples, you may be able to go and buy, and I say this all the time, office goods, toiletries, soap for the bathrooms. You can buy that stuff easily. You don't need complicated contracts. And if you want to source from multiple providers that are currently providing the best price that week, that absolutely makes sense because you're doing that 3 bids and a buy mentality. And if you're doing that for those type of goods, that makes total sense. But when you have to negotiate a contract in order to consume from that service, from that software provider, the conversation shifts. It's not that easy. You're not able to do a 3 bids and a buy all the time. You can do that in an RFP. You can compare the platforms. But what I would counter is when you are doing the RFP, the suppliers that you currently have contracts with that have products or services that play in that RFP, they should have favored nation status, all other things being somewhat equal. If you don't have to spend 6 months negotiating a new contract with a company that you're already doing business with and you can strengthen that strategic relationship, that makes way more sense even if the other product is 15 or 20% better. You're going to get to market faster, you're going to leverage an existing platform, and you're going to have a more strategic relationship with a supplier that you already know works well with your company. Obviously, if the company that you are already doing business with isn't doing well, you shouldn't let them participate in the RFP, right? Right. Managing tail spend is difficult, and tail spend gets out of control with bigger companies. Smaller companies, for the most part, have a handle on it. They're not investing in onboarding all of these suppliers. But as the company gets bigger, as the company acquires other companies, as the company is spreading geographically and is forced to do business with local suppliers, or not forced, they may have the great honor of doing business with local providers, depending on needs, that expands your supplier base. So sometimes you have an opportunity to step back and say, you know what? These regional providers worked for a while, but there's a national player that operates in all of these states, and I can consolidate to one. You have to look into those things, and that's part of the strategy. Market conditions change. Is there a new 800-pound gorilla in that space that you can engage with that will severely consolidate your contracting needs? And it adds a little bit more safety. Cutting down your tail spend can get complicated because you may have customers that are really attached to certain suppliers and they do not want to shift. But as a company grows and as the need arises, it's time to make holistic, strategic decisions for that business. And sometimes that might mean sacrificing a great supplier, a favorite supplier, because they just don't fit anymore. Too many suppliers are a distraction. Too many suppliers cost money. Too many suppliers open the opportunity for risk. Tail spend needs to be consistently managed and consistently consolidated. Tail spend can drag a procurement department and risk department, information protection department. It can bring a company to its knees if there are a lot of risk transactions and data risks and breaches. If those are all happening at the same time, it can drag things to a halt. Be smart, be strategic, consolidate your supplier base to the best of your abilities, and try to kill the tail spend. This was a passionate one. I legitimately spent the last 3 or 4 years of my life going after tail spend at my job. And every time you think you have a handle on it, or you peel back the onion, you go and you find more problems and more opportunities to fix. It takes years when you're at a large company to really address tail spend. And you have to make sure you have the right tools, the right reporting. You're working with your AP department because you have to follow the money. And it can be really time consuming, but it is important and it is rewarding. And You may think that it's a negative because you're hurting all of these suppliers, but you're actually strengthening the relationships with the suppliers you want to do more strategic things with. And that is a good thing. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. And I'll be back with another video when I come up with another idea. Hopefully soon. Thank you.